There are three key points to keep in mind when talking about the nutrition facts panel. The first one is that as a professional or as a nutritionist, you have a lot more knowledge than you'll be able to or you need to cover the first week, so keep it simple. The second is that the nutrition facts panel is the tool that people will use when making decisions about their food. And the third point is that the nutrition facts panel will be revisited each and every week. It's not necessary to go over it with a fine-tooth comb the first week because you will be able to talk about it again and again throughout the next 6 weeks. The first section I like to talk about starts at the top and it goes from nutrition facts down to servings per container. The real take-home message when we're talking about serving size is that the participant needs to understand that they need to do the math, either dividing or multiplying based on how much they plan to eat. For example, if a participant were to look at a box of macaroni and cheese and to look at the serving size, typically the serving size is listed as 1/2 box. At that point, the participant should know to ask themselves, how much will they be eating? Will they eat 1/2 box or will they eat an entire box? So from there, if they're going to eat the entire box, all of the numbers on the nutrition facts panel, including the calories and these percentages, would then need to be doubled. The next thing I'd like to talk about is this section, calories and calories from fat. I don't like to get too caught up in the discussion about calories, but it might be nice at this point to remind people what a calorie is and just suggesting that it's a unit of energy. The amount of calories obviously is per serving. So again, if they're going to eat less or more than the serving listed, they need to do the math on the calories. The next thing I like to address is these next two sections, which tell us specifics about the amounts of nutrients in our food. The top section, which goes from total fat to sodium, denotes foods that we should limit in our diet or make sure we don't get too much of. From carbohydrates to calcium, these are nutrients that we want to make sure that we get enough of in our diets. I like to talk to people about not focusing so much on the specific grams, but to focus more on these percentages. When we're talking about the things that we want to eat in moderation or to limit in our diet, when we're looking at these percentages, a good rule of thumb is that if it says 20% or more of the daily value, then that's something that is a red flag. The reason why is because that shows that there's a significant amount of that thing in this particular food item. Remembering also to remind people about serving size. So if this said 20% and they were going to eat double the amount of the serving size, well then that's 40%. That should be a red flag for people. When we get down to this carbohydrates through calcium, these are things that we want to make sure that we have enough of in our diet. So when you're talking to participants, something for them to look at with the percent of daily value is if it's above 20%, well that shows us that likewise there's a significant amount of that nutrient in the serving of this food. So that's probably good for something like fiber and our vitamins. If the number here is less than 5% on the things that we want to make sure that we limit, that's not a significant source of that nutrient. That's probably okay. When it's things that we want to make sure we get enough of in our diet, 5% or less, that shows that there's not a significant amount of that thing. Maybe we want to look for something that has more than 5 or greater than 20. Something I like to point out to the participants is that this last column, these percentages, don't need to add up to any particular total. A common misperception is that people think that these numbers should add up to the number 100. Something important when we're talking about the things that we want to make sure that we have enough of, and something that participants were concerned about sugars in their diet, is to point out that the closer the number of grams of sugar to the number of grams of carbohydrate, the more likely that that's a high sugar item. A good example when trying to explain this is to have a can of soda, not diet, or a sugary snack. The bottom part, the footnote, I don't spend too much time talking about because it's not the most significant part of the panel, but I do like to mention it because often people wonder why this is here. Okay, for the sake of example in this video, let's pretend the ingredient list is right here below the nutrition facts panel. And so I would show participants on their food item where the ingredient list is. So the key message to take home with the ingredient list is that the ingredients are listed by weight. So the thing that is listed first is going to be the thing that is the primary ingredient in that food item. There is more of that particular ingredient than anything else in that package. Something like chips are a great teaching tool when we're talking about ingredient lists. When we look at the list of ingredients in Doritos, there's about 35 ingredients, more than half of which aren't recognizable, never mind unpronounceable. If you compare that to Fritos, there's only 3 ingredients listed. Most likely these three ingredients are familiar to people: corn, oil, and salt. I'm not saying that one product is better than the other or that chips are the best snack, but reading the ingredient label can help people make an educated choice. Because the nutrition facts panel is typically taught during the first class, a lot of the participants might not understand what all of these nutrients are. So I recommend that you don't take too much time to get into the detail about every single nutrient, and remind the participants that there'll be plenty of time throughout the 6-week series to discuss things in more detail. Of course, feel free to briefly explain some concepts, but the main goal of this lesson is for them to understand how to use the nutrition facts panel as opposed to really understanding the nitty-gritty about particular nutrients.